Continuing the fifth lecture, the Zohar, Book 1, and its author, from Gershom G. Scholem's Major Trends in Jewish Mysticism. Now, the point is that while the many peculiarities of his authentic speech are not found in the writings of any other contemporary author, not even Gikatilla, to whom he is very close in other respects, they do correspond in the most striking manner to certain peculiarities of the language of the Zohar. One finds in both the same deviations from the common usage. In some cases, even the same mistakes. And these mistakes occur not only in Hebrew passages, which might be thought to be translations of the corresponding Aramaic passages of the Zohar, but also where this possibility is excluded. The same wrong constructions, the same words with peculiar new meanings, the same wrong verb inflections, the same manner of confusing the verb stems of kal and hil. All these and many other characteristics of Moses Bileon's Hebrew language are also to be found in the Zohar. Any translator of the Zohar would have corrected these mistakes, especially in the many cases where they are in flagrant contradiction with the usage common in Hebrew. Moses Bileon does nothing of the sort. He displays precisely the same preference for endless repetition, verbal bombast, and the indiscriminate use of certain terms which are thereby almost robbed of their meaning. No other writer, for example, uses the word mystery half as often as he and author of the Zohar. In most cases, to very little purpose. Again, both Moses de Leon and author of the Zohar display the same aversion to the terms Kabbalah and Sephiroth, the infrequent use of which in his Hebrew writings is doubly striking in view of the plethora of Kabbalistic terms which crowd every page of his books. And if one turns from the use of words to the construction of sentences, one is struck by the many instances where one of his Hebrew passages, freely written and not taken from the Zohar in its construction and in its use of words, reads for all the world like a translation from the Zohar. This is particularly true of the parallelism with the Hebrew part of the Midrash HaMilam. Often, one scarcely realizes that a passage one has just read in its own proper context is, to all intents and purposes, nothing but an almost literal repetition of a passage from the Midrash HaMilam. The chief difference between the two is that in Moses de Leon's other Hebrew writings, the style has usually been touched up and embellished by the flowery scriptural phrases, for which there was, of course, no room in a pseudo-Midrash. Again, analyzing those passages of which it is expressly said that their sources are antique, and in which are in fact to be found only in the Zohar, one comes upon a highly significant uncertainty of phrasing in the introductory formula. No medieval author would have ever thought of referring to the Talmud or the Midrash as the work of commentators, a term reserved exclusively for medieval writers. Moses de Leon, nevertheless, thinks nothing of introducing quotations from the Zohar, alternatively, as words of the wise, and as the opinion of the commentators. Well, they are commentators. To this must be added the further significant fact that these quotations frequently differ in no way from their context, where the author advances as his own literary product what is simply taken from the Zohar, without troubling to quote his references. Nothing could be more mistaken than to imagine that Moses de Leon, in quoting the Zohar, or whatever name he gave it, is careful to distinguish what he quotes from what he puts forward as his own brainchild. His way of quoting the Zohar is to some extent conditioned by the need of masking the true position. The Sefer HaRaman, in particular, abounds with such quotations where the quotation marks are actually applied to only a very small portion of long passages lifted textually from the Zohar, sometimes even from a single paragraph. He is simply quoting himself under another name, even where he paraphrases a Zoharic passage with his own words. These turn out upon analysis to be nothing but a repetition of the words used in some other part of the Zohar. The manner in which Moses de Leon makes use of the Zohar contrasts sharply with the attitude he displays, where his source is a genuine midrash. With the latter, he does not vary quotations or combine them into a new context. With the Zohar, however, he shows no hesitation in employing his material in a new form. Sometimes he quotes an idea almost without changing an expression, but as often as he strings together scattered thoughts from the original and vice versa, his method is that of the artist who shapes the material into any form he desires. One never has the feeling that the author is laboriously groping through the text for suitable quotations, which can be incorporated in his own work. On the contrary, every word breathes the same spirit, and it is left to the critic to discover, with no small amount of labor, that the constituent thoughts of a firmly constructed homily are to be found scattered among various Zoharic passages. When one has analyzed a number of such examples, one begins to realize that in many cases the author is strictly speaking not dealing in literary quotations at all, but merely adapting the method already worked out in the Zohar, whose subject matter is constantly present in his mind, the motifs of his homiletics being always before his eye, so to speak. His technique consists in presenting them now in this way, now in that, often without adhering strictly to the particular construction of thought which was dominant in his mind when he wrote the Zohar. In this sense, his Hebrew writings are a genuine continuation, and in some cases a further development of the Zohar. The same fact also explains why Jelinek, who was the first to undertake a comparative study of the Zohar, and one of Moses de Leon's Hebrew texts, was led to the wrong conclusion that the latter were written before the Zohar. This idea may have suggested itself to him because he found that a single train of thought in Moses de Leon's Hebrew book recurred in the form of 3 scattered fragments in the Zohar. Had he considered the possibility that the author might have continued his work on the same motifs after completing the Zohar, he would have been led to more fruitful conclusions. The same technique of variation on themes begun in the Zohar is evident in the way in which he employs parables and similes capable of illustrating more than one idea, modifying them as context demands, or he translates a piece of cosmic symbolism which he has introduced in the Zohar into the equivalent psychological symbol. A conversation in the Zohar between the sun and the moon concerning her waning, a variation of a Talmudic Agadah, is converted in Moses de Leon's Mishkan HaAduth into a dialogue between God and the soul. In every instance, it is evident that the author is completely familiar with the subject and is making use of it as one would with one's own work, although he is careful to conceal this fact as far as this is possible. Again, Moses de Leon's library is exactly the same as that of the Zohar. How often does it happen that some or more less unfamiliar source of a Zoharic passage which I noted down as such next turned up in Moses de Leon's treatment of the same subject. The very mistakes he makes in quoting his sources throw light on his authorship of the Zohar. Let us take an example in the Midrash known under the name Pesikta. The inauguration of the tabernacle is compared to a wedding, the comparison resting on a play of words, which in turn suggested a further idea to the Kabbalist. For the marriage of God and the community of Israel's a word that means something. It's kind of like a mujahideen, so it's not just something you're born into or something. For the marriage of God and the community of Israel. They substituted that of Moses in the Shekinah, the description of Moses as the man of God, thus being made to signify, according to them, that he was indeed the husband of the Shekinah. This interpretation, which is of course entirely foreign to the Pesikta, is advanced by more than one Kabbalist of the period, to which we are concerned, and also plays an important part in the Zohar, where it appears in several variations. Moses, according to the Zohar, was the only mortal who was vouchsafed the mystical union with the Shekinah during his earthly life, and who from then on constantly remained in this state of mystical marriage. Moses de Leon, whose mind dwells entirely on those constructions, quotes one of the most remarkable Zoharic passages on this subject, but from the Pesikta, the mystical interpretation which he has himself read into this Pesikta passage is so dominant in his mind that he inadvertently quotes the Midrash in support of an idea which he has actually developed in the Zohar. In addition to the genuine sources of his ideas, which he is in the habit of referring to with more or less circumstantial accuracy, there is also in his Hebrew writings more than a trace of pseudo-epigraphy. Thus, he quotes long passages from the Book of Enoch, which are not to be found in the Zohar, but which have the advantage of fitting in admirably, both in content and in style, with his own train of thought. There can be no question of his having used an Arabic Book of Enoch unknown to us, or anything else of that sort, nor is it necessary to assume that he had himself written such a book before he quoted it. Although he may have intended to do so, or even have begun writing it, he is the first to quote from the above-mentioned Testament of Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, of which I have said that it must have been written by the author of the Zohar himself. The same applies to non-authentic pieces from alleged responsa of the Babylonian savant Hai Ga'an, which contains several passages in the vein of the Midrash HaNilam, and concerning the origin of which there has hitherto been some obscurity. Here again, Moses de Leon, the author of the Midrash HaNilam, is the first to quote one of these bogus responsa, which even a scholar of the rank of David Luria 80 years ago adduced as proof of the hoary antiquity of the Zohar. It follows that he must have had a share in the writing of these pseudepigraphic responsa, even if he did not write all of them, and generally speaking, there is no lack in his Hebrew writings of curious parables, legends, etc., which, while they are not to be found in the Zohar, are entirely in harmony with its spirit, and in some of which we encounter legendary persons whom we met in the Zohar as the alleged authors of mystical text. It is worth mentioning that in his Hebrew writings, Moses de Leon not infrequently deals very fully with matters which the Zohar mentions only in passing, thereby incidentally confirming the authenticity of Zoharic passages which critics as well as later Kabbalists have treated as interpolations. A study of his Hebrew writings is in fact supplies the best commentary to large parts of the Zohar. On the literary side, it helps one to realize that Moses de Leon as a writer was fully equal to the task of writing the Zohar, but it is also plain how important the artificial patina of his Aramaic, with its strangeness and its solemnity, was for the literary success of the Zohar. Had it been written in Hebrew and without that picturesque background, I rather doubt whether it would have produced anything like the same impression. 11. If the proper account is taken of all these facts, certain allusions in Moses de Leon's writings to his mystical sources appear no longer as anything but veiled references to his own scholarship. Thus, in 1290, he remarks in his Book of the Rational Soul that only recently the spring of mystery has begun to flow into land, a plain allusion to the recent publication of some of the Zoharic writings, but the most remarkable hints of this genre are to be found in the Mishkan HaAduth, written in 1293, from which I shall quote, as literally as possible, the most important passage, one which, like so much else, has escaped the notice of writers on the subject, in a passage where he discusses the theory of a twofold Gehenna, a close parallel to the above-mentioned idea of a double paradise. He prefaces his Zoharic variations on the subject by the following remarks. Concerning this matter, there are hidden mysteries and secret things which are unknown to men. You will now see that I am revealing deep and secret mysteries, which the holy sages regarded as sacred and hidden, profound matters, which, properly speaking, are not fit for revelation, so that they may not become a target for the wit of every idle person. Well, isn't that why God sent prophets, is that everybody can have the proper guidance that they need? Not, this is secret or whatnot. Certainly a prophet could keep a secret, right? But, hence the term Kahin, the access-controlling priest, which I'm not in favor of, by the way. These holy men of old have pondered all their lives over these things and have hidden them, and did not reveal them to everyone, and now I have come to reveal them. Therefore keep them to yourselves, unless it be that you encounter one who fears God and keeps his commandments and the Torah. Well, you certainly maybe should start with some things before other things. I looked at the ways of the children of the world and saw how, in all that concerns these theological matters, they are enmeshed in foreign ideas and false, extraneous, or heretical notions. One generation passes away and another generation comes, but the errors and falsehoods abide forever, and no one sees and no one hears and no one awakens, for they are all asleep, for a deep sleep from God has fallen upon them, so that they do not question and do not read and do not search out. And when I saw all this, I found myself constrained to write and to conceal and to ponder, in order to reveal it to all thinking men, and to make known all these things with which the holy sages of old concerned themselves all their lives, for they are scattered in the Talmud and in their other words and secret sayings, prescient and hidden, better even than pearls, and they, the sages, have closed and locked the door behind their words and hidden all their mystical books, because they saw that the time had not come to reveal and publish them, even as the wise king has said to us, "Speak, not in the ears of a fool." Yet I have come to recognize that it would be a meritorious deed to bring out to light what was in the dark, and to make known the secret matters which they have hidden. And a few pages later he says, "And though I now reveal their mysteries, the Almighty God knows that my purpose in doing so is good, in order that I may become wise and retain their faith in God, and hear and learn and fear in their soul, and rejoice because they know the truth." Now this appears to me a highly significant statement, to refer in such a manner and in so many ambiguous terms to a work which, as we have seen, was without any doubt written shortly before it is to reveal one's authorship, short of abounding in the pseudo-apocryphal fiction, a thing not to be expected of him. Moses de Leon could hardly go further in proclaiming himself to be the author of these words of the wise, which feels compelled to write and to conceal. As his own excellent phrase puts it, he does not explicitly claim to have discovered the old books themselves. His purpose is merely to reveal what it must be contained in them, if they were in accordance with that meaning of the Kabbalah, which was to him natural and supremely important. At the same time, the evidence he provides in these passages also supplies a clear picture of the motives which led him to write the Zohar, and which are expressed with special emphasis in his long preface to the Sefer HaRaman. Jelinek, who was the first to discern these motives from the much briefer allusions in the Book of the Rational Soul, and Gratz, who followed him on this point, were right in their assertion. Moses de Leon wrote the Zohar in order to stem the growth of the radical rationalistic mood, which was widespread among his educated contemporaries, and with regard to which we have quite a number of interesting testimonials. He refers in one of his books to the opinions and habits of these circles, who had already broken in theory as well as in practice with large parts of Jewish tradition and religious law. In opposition to them, he strives to maintain the undefiled Judaism of the Torah as he interpreted it in his mystical way. A mystical midrash, which presented an impressive picture of the profundity of the divine word, appeared to him as the best instrument for awakening an understanding of the grandeur of true Judaism when it is properly, i.e., mystically, understood. And since he was a man of genius, he succeeded over and above the immediate purpose which he set himself, and which is now clear to us, in giving magnificent expression to the spirit of that contemporary world, a Spanish Kabbalism, which was the abode of his own restless mind. The figure of the man now stands clearly before us. He came from the world of philosophic enlightenment, against which he subsequently conducted so unremitting a fight. In his youth we see him brooding over Moses Maimonides' great work, and in going to some expense to procure a private copy. Somewhat later, his mystical inclinations turn him in the direction of Neoplatonism. There can be no doubt that he read those extracts from Plotinus's Enneads, which were current in the Middle Ages, under the title of the Theology of Aristotle. He quotes in one of his writings Plotinus's description of the philosopher's ecstatic ascent into the world of pure intelligence, and his vision of the One. But at the same time, he is more and more attracted by the mystical side of Judaism, which appears to him as its true core, and gradually he comes to ponder the mystery of Godhead as it was presented by the Kabbalistic theosophy of his age. He studies, alters, selects, and develops these ideas and links them with his own thoughts on a mystical theory of morals, and thoughts which play so large a part in the Zohar, as well as in all his Hebrew writings. But the theosophist and moralist in whom the genius comes to life has also developed the adventurous side of his being, for it is plain that he embarked on a great adventure in writing and propagating the Midrash HaNilam and the Zohar, even if one concedes him his great hours of inspiration, as I, for one, am prepared to do. For him, however, there was no paradox in what he did, and I am almost inclined to say that he was right. Pseudepigraphy is far removed from forgery. The mark of immorality, which is inseparable from falsehood, does not stain it, and for this reason it has always been admitted as a legitimate category of religious literature of the highest order, the highest moral order. Now, it's obvious that Gershom G. Scholem kind of knows what happened with the text of the Tanakh, but the historian of religion in particular has no cause to express moral condemnation of the pseudepigraphist. The quest for truth knows of the adventures that are all its own, and in a vast number of cases has arrayed itself in pseudepigraphic garb. The further a man progresses along his own road in this quest for truth, the more he might become convinced that his own road must have been trodden by others ages before him. To the streak of the adventurousness which was in Moses de Leon, no less than to his genius, we owe one of the most remarkable works of Jewish literature and of the literature of mysticism in general. And we continue the notes to Lecture 2. The addition of Yahweh Tzbaut to the name entirely accords with the traditional usage of the greater Hekaloth. There too we read Zecher Yahweh Alhi Yisrael, chapter 3:2. R. Matz Yahweh Alhi Yisrael, chapter 1:1, according to the manuscript. The archons, too, in addition to their angelic names, bear the name Yahweh by the name of their king. C.F. Odeberg, page 29, in the commentary to the Hebrew Enoch, chapter 10. Further, Barakoth 51a relates three things which Ishmael heard from the prince of the divine face, Suriel, not from Metatron, as later Gaonic editions would have it. At an earlier date, Ishmael was already regarded as the type of the martyr. Becker, located at the site. This may explain his appearance as an apocalyptic visionary in several apocalypses from the Hekaloth circle. His real position was a disciple of Rabbi Nehuniah ben Hakana, which, however, was confined to the Halakha, received a mystical projection among the members of his circle. Similarly, his controversial attitude towards Aqaba in the halakhic discussions now received a mystic aureola in the Hekaloth tracts. 4 refers to Spiegel's in the Journal of Biblical Literature, volume 54, part 3, 1935, page 164 to 165. According to, note 5 is, according to S. Lieberman, Madrashi Tiemann, 1940, page 16. This is already attested to in the 3rd century by Origen's in his preface to the Song of Solomon. For this particularly important text, see G.H. Box's introduction and translation, The Apocalypse of Abraham, London, 1919. Baldensperger, Die Messianische Apokalyptischen Hoffnungen des Judentums, page 68, is note 6. Note 8, thus can be said in Midrash Mishled, a proverb 20:2. Kol mah shubra balmu babau beksa. Altogether, correspondences such as that between the throne and creation play a large part in the more mystical midrashim. Instances are the parallel between the world and man. Macrocosm and microcosm are between the tabernacle and the world. The microcosm motif is most clearly expressed in the passage of the Abadoth de Rabbi Nathan, chapter 31, where it says, Kol ma shubra hakab bartz bara bottom. Oh, the separated letters in H. The conception of the tabernacle as a parallel to creation, such as it is found in the Midrash Tasha, chapter 2, appears to belong to the later Midrash and have come from southern France. 9. Material on the mysticism of the throne from Pseudepigrapha and Midrashim. but not from the writings of the Merkabah school, is to be found in Strock and Bellerbeck. Kommentar zum Neuen Testament aus Talmud und Midrash, Volume 1, 1922, page 974 to 978. Note 10, see P.H. Bloch in Festschrift für Jakob Gutmann, 1915, page 13 to 123, an analysis of the names not explained by Bloch of the Roman king and his wife in the Apocalypse, which form the second major part of the Greater Hekaloth, reveals a curious detail. If one reads them as cryptograms according to the Bash alphabet, i.e. if one substitutes for each letter the corresponding one by counting backwards from the end of the alphabet, one obtains words which, though corrupted, clearly reveal themselves as Germanic names by the end syllables ik and ut, and in fact one also finds the cryptograms of awkward words in other parts of the manuscripts of the text. See also the text of the Apocalypse derived from such a manuscript in Naphtali, Elhanan, Bacharach's, Emek, Hamelech, 1648, F39C, FF11. Important and as yet unedited material on the subject of Merkabah mysticism is to be found, above all, in the Hebrew manuscripts of the Bodleian Library, Oxford number 1531, British Museum 752, Munich State Library 22 and 40, Jethus, New York 1828, 12, Third Enoch, or the Book of Enoch, edited and translated by Hugo Odeberg, 1928. Unfortunately, the correct text has to be worked out with the aid of the critical apparatus, since the edition is based on a particularly bad manuscript. The very elaborate commentary, however, is on the whole valuable. 13. The Greater Hakaloth has been edited as Hiklut Rebti Angelex Beth HaMidrash, 13, 1855, page 83 to 108, and from a different manuscript as Perki Hiklut by S.A. Wertheimer, Jerusalem, 1889. Both texts are extremely bad. A new edition is being prepared by me on the basis of the manuscript and the printed material available to me. The Lesser Hekaloth, Hiklut, Zuth 30 are to be found in Jelnik as already preface to Meth HaMidrash 4:22. The Hebrew manuscript 1531 of Bodleiana in Oxford, folio 38a to 46a, parts therefrom have been printed without being recognized as such from a manuscript of Joff collection in Jerusalem in the compilation Merkabah Scholem, Jerusalem, 1922, folio 6a to 8b. Here again the text is very bad, but can be corrected from the manuscripts. Odeberg, introduction, page 104, mistakenly gives the name of Lesser Hekaloth to a piece which has nothing to do with them, but like the former has appeared in the compilation Merkabah Scholem and belongs to the mystery of Sandalphon from a book called Merkabah Rabbah 14, note 14. In the Lesser Hekaloth, Enoch Temetron is not mentioned at all. In the Greater Hekaloth, only once, and not in one of the oldest pieces. The fact that the system of these tracks has no room for him in the Book of Enoch, chapter 10, a belated and somewhat artificial attempt is made to find a place for him at the entrance to the Seven Palace as to establish a link with the older tracks. These early tracks contain a great deal more truly antique material of somewhat bizarre originality than the Book of Enoch, which is more conventional both in subject matter and style. The references to Metatron traditions, for details see further on, are not the source of the corresponding Talmudic passages as Odeberg seems to have thought, but rather vice versa. The manner in which the legend of Metatron as the celestial scribe, as well as the entire Aggadah on Aher, in Haggadah, and the position of Metatron as the teacher of prematurely dead children in paradise. I don't think anybody prematurely dies, but Aboda Zara 3b is transformed in the tracks, shows clearly that they belong to a much later phase of development. 15. It is true that here, too, additions were made at the beginning and the end of the main part of the old text, with the result that its antique and very characteristic style has become blurred. The Aramaic of the text is old and genuine, the dialect Babylonian. The hero is Aqaba, while the greater Hekaloth give more prominence to Ishmael. 16. J. Haggadah 2. 1. Tosefta to the same passage. Ledrush, Bakdud, Abinu, Shamim is employed as a synonym for Ledrush, B'masha, Merkabah. The term used in Agadah 14b, Kabud, as a theosophic term for one who thrones on the Merkabah, is fairly general in 2nd century rabbinical sources. See Michael Sachs' remarks on the subject, Karem Hamed 7, 275, and Senor Sachs in Ha Tahiyya 122f. The use of phrases like Muchna, Hus al Kabud, Kunu, Hut Kabud, Bakbud Chi, Nusha at Hukbud are, in parentheses, we have Supra, Luikra, Aleph, Aleph, Semek, Yud, Bait. And then in parentheses, we have Hagiga, Beta, Yerushalmi, Chagiga, Bait, How Meme are proof of the existence of a quite definite terminology. 17, Haggadah 15b, Hanichu, Lezkaz Za, Zrawi, La Shitmush, Bukbudi. Haggadah 15b. The verb Hushtumush in the whole, this literature is a fixed term for the undertaking theurgical practices.